Hi guys, this is Miss Anderson and welcome. Today we are going to knock them out with an informative essay. Yes, we are going to learn how to write an informative essay. You ready? Let's go. So let's start with what is an informative essay? The word informative means to give information. That is what our essay is going to do. Our essay is going to provide the reader with information about our topic. The structure of an essay has 5 paragraphs. It has an introduction. It has 1, 2, 3 body paragraphs, and then it has a conclusion paragraphs. So the structure of our essay that we are going to do today is going to have 5 paragraphs, and it's going to include the introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph. So let's write an informative essay. So we have our book that we are going to use to write our essay with, and an informative essay can be written from a book, a magazine, a video, a news show. It can be written from any source because all you're doing is providing information from that source to your reader. So the genre of our book is nonfiction. Our topic is World War I. And again, the purpose of our essay is to inform people about World War I. So let's not forget that we must use the writing process when writing our essay. In fact, the writing process is used for any type of writing. For example, we have a text here and we have a dissertation here. Let me show you how both of these actually follow the writing process. So let's start with our text here. So when we get ready to send a text, we think about what we're going to send and who we're going to send it to. Then we write out our draft, okay? So we start writing our text, okay? Then we change our minds, we rewrite the text, we change some words, we add some emoticons. Then hopefully we go back and make sure we spelled all our letters correct. We added some punctuation. After we've done that, we reread it again to make sure everything was great. And then if it was great, we sent it. So in the space of 2 minutes, the time that it takes to send a text, you have actually followed all 5 steps of the writing process. Easy, right? Now let's go over here to our dissertation, okay? So we are a doctorate candidate for a PhD, and we have to write this very in-depth dissertation. We're also going to follow this same writing process. We're going to think about what we're going to write. We're going to draft our first draft, write it down. We're going to revise it to make it better. We're then going to edit it to make sure that it has punctuation, correct spelling, all of that. Then we're going to have it reviewed by one of our peers or a teacher. And once we're satisfied that we have it spick and span and nice and good, then we're going to publish it. So guys, the process is the same no matter if you're writing something as small as a text or something as large as a dissertation. So let's start with step number 1. Let's start with planning. The planning stage tells us who, what, and why we are writing. So our topic, or what we are writing about, is World War I. Who's going to read our writing? Who's going to be our audience? Is going to be our peers and our teacher. And what's the purpose or reason that we're writing? Well, this is an informative essay. To provide information, you say? Yes. And then what are we doing? We are writing a 5-paragraph essay. Okay, The next thing we're going to do is pre-write. So we're still in step number 1 of the writing process. We planned out what we're going to write about, and now we're actually going to write some stuff down so that we can have our thoughts flow like we want them to. We can stay on course, and our essay won't end up talking about kittens or puppies instead of our topic that we've chosen. So we're going to start with your essay title. The title of your essay is going to go right here. So you're going to think of something nice and creative that's going to draw the attention of your reader. Once you have your essay title, then you're going to pull out from the book that you read 3 main ideas. And these are 3 big points that the book made. Then after that, for each main idea, you're going to give your reader 3 points about those main ideas. Okay? So in this step of the writing process, we are going to add a title. We're going to have 3 main ideas. And then for each of those main ideas, we're going to have 3 points about those main ideas. So here is our example of our pre-writing. And so in the middle here, we have our essay title. Okay, the title of our essay is What Do You Know About World War I? So our title is nice and catchy, and it will draw the attention of our reader to make them want to read even more. So the 3 main ideas that we are going to talk about in our paper are going to be the cause of war, the weapons that were used in World War I, and then the world after the war. So those are our 3 main topics. Now remember I said that under each main topic you're going to have 3 points that you're going to make. So going back to our main idea for number 1, the cause of war, we're going to talk about how the war began, why it began, and then who started the war. And then when we move into our next paragraph, we're going to talk about the types of weapons used in the war, the effects of those weapons, and then the result of the impact of those weapons on the war and the world. And then for our next point, we are going to talk about the effects of war, the people that were affected by the war, and then the end result after the war. So those are the things that we're going to talk about in our paper. So now we are ready to draft. Okay, so the next step in the writing process is drafting. So here's where we're going to take our ideas that we just wrote down, and we are going to now think of some sentences. So now this is the creative part where you are you're using your head and you are crafting sentences in your mind, and then you're writing those sentences down. So let's go over what our first paragraph, which is our introduction, what it should have in it. So if you look over here, our introduction paragraph should have an attention grabber. It should have our thesis, which is what our essay is going to talk about. It should have our opinion about our topic, and then it should have our 3 main points as well as examples of those main points. So let's take a look at this essay, okay? Now the first thing that you actually see is you actually see the page header. Yay! Always need a page header. Then here is your title, okay? And your title is centered in the middle of the page. And now we can go down to our first sentence, which is our attention grabber. And our attention grabber says, you have heard of World War I, right? And then we answer that by saying, well, if you have not, keep reading. Okay, then our thesis comes up next. This essay is going to enlighten you about World War I and how the war affected the world. And then we give our opinion on our topic. When reading about the war, I found it interesting and fascinating. Next, we give our three main points that we're going to talk about in the paper. The reasons I found it interesting was the cause of the war, the weapons used in the war, and the state of the world after the war. And then we're going to give some examples from our main points. Some examples of those reasons are who started the war, the types of weapons used in the war, and the end result. All right, all of that is our introduction. We have fully introduced our topic and what our essay is going to talk about to our reader. Okay, so after our introductory paragraph, next we have our body paragraphs. And so I'm not going to read these paragraphs to you. If you would, I would like you to pause the video and read the paragraphs yourself. But I do want to point out a few things in your body paragraph. The first thing is you always want to indent the first word in your paragraph. Next, you also want to add a transition word. So when we start our first body paragraph, a transition word like foremost would be very, very good. The next thing you may notice is that this paragraph is actually a page long. So when we go back and revise, which is the next step after we finish drafting, we're going to break this down into smaller paragraphs because paragraphs are not a page long. So if we look over here to paragraph number 2, we see it's also a page long in which we are going to have to revise. We also have some mistakes in here, and we also are going to move around some of these sentences and then change some of the words when we revise. But these are our first two body paragraphs. Okay, here we have our third body paragraph, okay, which is more a page than a paragraph, but it's supposed to be our third body paragraph. And then over here we have our conclusion. As you can see, each paragraph is indented, and then each paragraph has a transition, okay? So the last paragraph will usually say something like in conclusion or in summary or to summarize or something like that. And this is where we wrap up, and I would like for you to pause this video and read the essay. This is where we would wrap up and restate our thesis and our examples and then give a little bit more opinion about our topic. Okay, so I'll read the final essay to you at the end in just a second here. Okay, so after we have drafted our first draft, we have all of our thoughts down. Now we're going to go back and start step 3 of the writing process, which is simply revising. So we're going to move some things around. We're going to erase some words, like what I found right here is instead of saying I found it interesting was the cause of the war, I could say the reasons I found it interesting was how the war started. So I'm going to revise that, and you'll see that in the final copy of my revisions. Then also, you want to make sure that you're reading your writing to make sure and reading it out loud, not in your head, because reading out loud helps you hear the mistakes better. You want to make sure that your writing is clear. You want to make sure you included quotes from the book. And then you want to make sure that you are making your points. Remember those points that we wrote down when we did our pre-planning? That those have to be in your essay. So those should be here in your essay. So after we've revised it, we've changed it, we've made some corrections and some additions and deletions and things like that. Now we're going to go back and do step 4 of the writing process, which is edit. We're going to make sure that we've capitalized everything, that we checked our spelling, that we have the correct punctuation, especially things like commas and quotes and and even periods at the end of our sentences, okay? So now you still want to reread it again and you want to hear how it sounds. And then, in addition to rereading it yourself, once you feel that it's good enough, then please let someone else read it, like a peer or a teacher or a family member. Let someone else read it so that they can give you an idea on if it is ready to be published or if it needs some more revisions. Okay, so we have finished revising and editing our essay, and now we are going to rewrite it and publish it. And so here is our rewritten essay, and we actually typed it instead of writing it. And so I'm going to read it to you very quickly just so you can hear it read out loud. Here we go. What do you know about World War I? You have heard of World War I, right? Well, if you have not, then keep reading. This essay is going to enlighten you about World War I and how the war affected the world. When reading about World War I found it interesting and fascinating. The reasons I found it interesting was how the war started, the weapons used in the war, and the state of the world after the war ended. Some examples of those reasons are what caused the war, the types of weapons used in the war, and the result of the war itself. Foremost, to have a good picture of the time period, the U.S. Civil War was 1861 to 1865. World War I was 1914 to 1918. The war lasted 4 years. Per the book, before 1914, European nations such as the British, French, German, Dutch, Spanish, and Portuguese had colonized Europe and parts of India, Middle East, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. World War I started with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, an heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Austria-Hungary then declared war on Serbia. Russia allied with Austria, then Germany invaded Belgium and was headed toward France. On and on this conflict went, killing millions of people, and by 1918 over 100 countries, including the U.S., were involved in the war. Furthermore, the death casualty of World War I was significantly more than the U.S. Civil War. This was due to the use of weapons in the war. Gunpowder was invented by the Chinese back in 450 AD, and by the 1100s, gunpowder had made its way to Europe, who further developed it. Along with gunpowder came firearms. Per theblaze.com, the first recorded firearm, called the hand cannon, was invented in 1364. Just 15 years later, handguns were starting to spread through Europe and across the world. The Civil War has about 650 casualties, whereas World War I had over 38 million casualties and over 17 million deaths and 20 million wounded. Ironically, gunpowder and firearms were perfected by the Europeans and yet was used against each other in the war. Subsequently, the effects of the war were felt around the world. The Allies and Central Powers battled each other merciless. In April 1917, the U.S. joined the Allies, Britain, France, Russia, and the war continued until October 1918 when Germany surrendered. In November 1918, a treaty called the Armistice was signed in which Germany and the Central Powers lost most of their nations. Most of Europe was redistributed and new nations were formed. Germany was crushed after the war and went through a deep depression. The country had to borrow money from other countries just to keep going. Germany became very angry, and it was not until a young man named Adolf Hitler became the chancellor and vowed to make Germany great again that Germany started to change, but not in a good way. In conclusion, as you can see, World War I was very interesting. The war began by one single act that eventually caused millions to die. The use of firearms and other weapons also attributed to the high number of casualties. Lastly, the war destroyed countries such as Germany and caused terrible conditions of poverty and disease within the country. The country was in such bad shape that Adolf Hitler was able to convince people of his ideals and in the belief of a master race. Ultimately, it was the result of World War I that caused the Holocaust and subsequently World War II. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our essay. Okay, guys, you have been awesome, 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 awesome. You have stuck with me through this lesson, and I thank you very much for that. We've covered a lot of ground. We went through the writing process in writing an informative essay. And so the essay that we wrote was on World War One. That was our topic. And so it appears that that essay is a knock 'em out essay. All right, guys, thank you.